Hello, this is Elena, and you're about to listen to an episode of a new series we're calling The Effectiveness Workshop. After recording over 100 episodes of this show exploring marketing effectiveness, we realized we wanted more direct insights from CMOs who are applying these principles in their daily work. So we're introducing a new format where we chat with some incredibly smart marketers and jump right into practical takeaways to help you advance your career and your brand. I hope that you like it. Enjoy the show.
Marketing effectiveness.
What's your marketing philosophy?
What does marketing effectiveness mean to you?
Welcome to the Effectiveness Workshop.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines, and we're joined by a guest today, Tory Pachis, the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Amica Insurance, the longest-standing mutual insurer of automobiles in the U.S. A direct writer, Amica also offers home, life, and umbrella insurance, as well as annuities. Tory has over 2 decades of experience in both B2B and B2C marketing, branding, distribution, and advertising. He's been a driving force behind Amica's marketing strategy, including their recent high-profile partnership with the Boston Celtics. Prior to joining Amica, Tory held leadership roles at the Hanover Insurance Group and Travelers, where he led advertising, media buying, and more. He's a marketer with a passion for both performance and brand, which is the best kind of marketer in our opinion, so we're delighted to have him on the show. Welcome, Tory.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the show. I almost feel like this is how you know you've made it as a marketer.
Oh, no.
I don't know about that.
That's concerning for marketers.
I don't know about that. Now, Tory, there's a little factoid that I heard, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this. I hope it's correct, that you actually can speak Greek. Is that true?
I can. Yeah, I'm a first-generation American. Both my parents immigrated here. In fact, my real name on my driver's license and on my passport is Soterios. And the name Tory, my mom gave to me after watching and learning English from soap operas. She said there was a handsome doctor named Tory on Days of Our Lives when I was a little kid. So she said, we're going to give him the nickname
Nice.
Tory. So I'm named after some C-list actor from the 70s, I guess.
I love that. Well, ironically, we have a lot of Greek listeners. So I was wondering if you could say, welcome to the Marketing Architects podcast in Greek.
Kalos ήρθατε στο Marketing Architects podcast. I don't know the real translation of Marketing Architects podcast.
Fair enough. That was very good, though.
So
We're
cool.
international.
More cultured, thanks to Tory. You elevated us already.
Well, we're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data research and what drives business results. This interview with Tory is part of our effectiveness workshop, where we talk to marketers who are leading the way for effectiveness in the US. And I usually kick off these interviews with a piece of research or an article. And for this one, I found an article from friend of the pod, Mark Ritson. It's titled, "There's No Such Thing as Performance Branding Marketing." In the article, Ritson argues that brand marketing drives long-term growth, while performance marketing focuses on short-term sales, and the two should be approached separately. He reminds us of the long and the short of it theory, which emphasizes the importance of balancing long-term brand with short-term sales activation. Ritson believes it's possible to sell products and build a brand in the same ad, but trying to do both at once often dilutes the effectiveness of each. The reason is simple. Long-term brand marketing is all about creating emotional connections and building memory structures over time, where short-term performance marketing is aimed at driving immediate action with more rational, product-focused messaging. So, Tory, I wanted to open with that article today because when I chatted with you about coming on the show, one thing you mentioned that really interested me was your experience introducing more brand to the performance and brand marketing equation for Amica. And we are going to talk about that, but first, to focus on the article, do you agree, with Mark Ritson and others that performance and brand should be separate, campaigns, creative budgets, or do you think the two could be blended?
I absolutely agree with the article. And when I was reading it, I thought to myself, wow, there are so many similarities between what the author is saying and what we've been able to do here at Amica. I agree in the sense that brand is a long-term play that fuels future demand. And I think if you don't purposefully keep the two objectives separate, it's easy to overreact and pull from one budget or one objective to support another. I've been in scenarios where, as we're approaching maybe the fourth quarter or year-end results, and a lead goal or a sales goal is in sight. It's easy to pull from that brand budget or objective to fuel short-term demand. But in doing so, you're really pulling from that long-term investment. And brands take time to build. Investing in brand is a long-term play. It's a slow-moving target. I also think it's important from a creative standpoint. When you keep the two objectives and budgets separate, you're really allowing your creative team to develop campaigns, unique campaigns that support each of those unique objectives. That being said, I've worked at places where there isn't a brand budget and the majority of the spend is in performance channels. And if you've looked at it, you could see that performance channels can actually help mold brand perceptions in the absence of a brand budget or objective.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketers might be in that spot, probably more than want to be, where their sole purpose and right here and today is to ensure the lead counts are met, their site traffic, etc. We operate only in the linear and CTV space. And I think a lot of marketers would just consider that brand versus the entire ecosystem of marketing. It's brand messaging, it's brand budget, etc. And TV certainly is extremely effective at building brand awareness and mental availability. But this is one area that perhaps, I don't know, Elena, how you feel, and Rob, that we've differed a little bit in terms of opinion with Mr. Ritson and a couple of others. We have ample data to support that TV and CTV can and should be both a sales activation and a branding channel. Turn on the NFL on a Sunday afternoon and entire insurance category, it feels, will attempt to provide a bit of a masterclass on brand plus performance in TV. You've got Liberty Mutual and the Limo Emo stories, but a lot of times tagged with an offer. And so there's a mix of approaches, many of them using both story and sales activation tactics in the same creative message. So it's a tricky one. You've just got a mix of approaches. I think TV definitely can do both. It's a channel that reaches both in and out of market consumers, but interesting to hear kind of the journey that you've been on and bringing Amica to more of that brand side just versus just being speeds and feeds of the insurance category.
Some of the companies that you mentioned, every company's at a different point in their brand journey, right? And a lot of the companies that you mentioned have been investing in brand for decades. At Amica, we've just recently started investing in brand. We've got a really interesting history where the first 90 years of our existence, the only way you could get an Amica policy is if you were referred by an existing policyholder. You had to be a policyholder in good standing, and then you would refer a friend or family member. And for that reason, we almost have this sort of club-like mentality that's based on scarcity. And we also have multi-generational families that have been policyholders for decades. Over 20% of our book has been with us for over 30 years. It wasn't until about 1996 where the leadership team here decided in order to really grow the company, we need to advertise and bring in a wider set of consumers. And, the channels at the time were print and direct mail and very little television. So it was mostly performance marketing channels. And I would say it wasn't until recently, maybe the last 5 years, that our team took a hard look at our position in the marketplace, saw what our brand awareness was, and decided we really need to separate these two objectives and invest in the top of the funnel.
Speaking of your team, I'm curious about the role of the team because you've joined, I'm sure things have changed, you've introduced new channels. So what's the primary role of the team at Amica now? And does it differ at all from your role at previous brands, maybe like Travelers?
I've had the privilege of working at some great companies in the insurance industry, really well-run companies and terrific marketing leaders. So I've seen several models exist. I think at some of the larger carriers, there's a separation between business unit or performance marketing teams and more enterprise brand teams. Here at Amica, it's all under one umbrella. We made a strategic decision a few years ago to combine corporate communications and our business unit marketing under one umbrella. So we have 5 centers of excellence on our team that we've developed. One focused on marketing data science, another focused on brand and creative, a team focused on media and platform, one focused on web strategy, and another one that's focused on project management and operations. So we have a set of objectives and key results that we manage the business on. They range from top of the funnel, certain brand equity targets, to lead volume sales, lead quality, premium targets, and even a cost per sale target. But I think it's unique in the sense that we see ourselves as serving four audiences: existing policyholders, prospective Amica customers, but also employees and communities are really important audiences for us. We have a longstanding heritage of working with nonprofits in the local communities. It's a big part of our brand promise. About a third of the jobs that we handled as a Marcom team last year were geared towards employees. So we're very employee centric. It's part of our culture. So for that reason, we have very broad objectives, from building brand, driving leads, but also serving those four audiences.
I love hearing that you have those different audiences. I'm starting to understand more of how you sold in brand, because I think some of our best clients, they don't just look at brand marketing as a way to reach new prospects. They love that it reaches employees and current customers and more. But I have to ask how you did this, because introducing more brand is sort of a dream for a lot of marketers. And we want to hear how that happened for you. How did you introduce more brand channels to your mix and then balance them with your strong history with more traditional direct performance marketing?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. I joined this company in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. And one of my first questions to the marketing team at the time was, can I look at our brand tracker to see what our brand health metrics look like? And I realized that we didn't have any brand metrics because we didn't really invest in the top of the funnel. Like I said, it was mostly direct mail, paid search, and a mix of print, a little bit of TV. So our first step was to arm ourselves with data. We found a good firm to help us with brand tracker to measure our health metrics. And that's really where we found that our unaided awareness was less than 3% countrywide, in a very competitive category. As a direct writer who has no other distribution other than call centers and a website, that was concerning. There's a pretty interesting formula in the insurance category where there's a direct link between brand awareness and recall and your quote rate. The higher your awareness, the more likely you are to be quoted. There's also an interesting relationship between your lack of awareness and the number of companies you're quoted against. So, for example, maybe a State Farm who's leading the category in awareness might be quoted against one or two other carriers, whereas an Amica at the time with 3% awareness might be quoted against 6 or 7 other carriers. So we knew we had to really invest in the top of the funnel. It was a series of meetings with our CEO, our COO, our CFO, and even the board of directors to what I call create a burning platform. This is where we are. This is what's going to happen if we don't act now. And I'm so fortunate to have a leadership team here that believes in marketing as an investment. I've read the McKinsey study that might have been quoted on this show, where there's a disconnect sometimes between the C-suite and marketing, and that doesn't exist here. We've had the support of leadership to really invest in building the brand, and it's paid off in our results.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've created this vision, right? Just starting with something like, what does our brand funnel look like? Let's just start there. Unaided at less than 3%. It might not be super common to have a C-suite look at that data and say, well, we should or we shouldn't invest in brand. I'm sure there's a mix of reactions to data like that. So then you recognize that brand is a problem. You look to channels to try to solve that. As a TV agency, of course, we're deeply passionate about television as a channel, both linear and CTV. Could you share your experience with TV? Are you approaching it then more as a brand building channel, a performance channel, a combination of both?
I have a long history with TV dating back decades. I remember managing TRPs and GRPs and DRTV and remnant buys for other companies. I think it's an absolutely necessary channel for brand building. We see it as one that's more a brand building channel, but has a tremendous impact on our performance marketing channels. So one example of that is when we invest in television, we tend to see that our paid search becomes more efficient. So instead of consumers searching on generic product keywords like auto or home that are some of the costliest keywords available, top 10 keywords I think are insurance related, we now have more consumers searching on Amica as a brand, which is much more efficient. We've seen unique visitors to Amica.com, our website, double year over year from 2022 to 2023. And, I can only point to some of the investments we made at the top of the funnel for driving that. I think just another reason why TV is important for us is creative. We haven't talked about that yet, but we have a very unique creative strategy that's based on highly emotive creative. We kind of looked at where the industry was going and wanted to find the white space and go the opposite way. And I think if you'll look at our ads, they're emotional and they're geared towards television as a channel. You can't really get that same message across in some of those lower funnel performance marketing channels.
In such a crowded category, I think that just makes so much sense. That stands out to me creatively in terms of your strategy there and looking for that white space. It definitely does stand apart from a lot of humor, et cetera, being already used in that insurance category. So props to you guys there.
Yeah, Tory, I did want to ask you a bit about the messaging for your brand campaigns, because I did some polite stalking of Amica before this interview. And yeah, your spots, they stand out. And the tagline I saw at some of them was "Empathy is our best policy." And that seemed to really match with what I learned about your brand and just your positioning. So I'm curious, how did you find that right message? Like, what was the process of finding it, but then also deciding the best way to share it?
So you mentioned it. The insurance category seems to have a playbook on creative, right? I think there was a study at some point done that humor is so closely linked to brand recall. And, we saw the success that Geico had in introducing the gecko in the late 90s. So there was sort of this copycat league of mascots, jingles, slogans, and they're all very successful campaigns. But when we looked at our mission and our value proposition, it's very different. At Amica, our mission statement is to deliver peace of mind and build enduring relationships. And that's not something you often hear from insurance companies that want to build enduring relationships. We lead the insurance category in JD Power Awards for customer service. So we don't compete on price, right? Like, we can't play the commodity game up against many of the other carriers. So we made a strategic decision years ago to say, hey, we need another advertising agency partner to help us find what's real about this brand and how to make it different. We went through an extensive agency search with a terrific search consultant named Joanne Davis. We landed on an advertising agency called Mother in Brooklyn, New York. Imagine standing in front of the boardroom and saying, we picked Mother. I got a lot of strange looks, but their value proposition aligned with us. They weren't owned by a holding company. They were independent. Their approach to creative really made sense to us. And one of the first moves they made was we sat together with them listening to phone calls in our call centers, sales calls, service calls, claims calls. And we found that our brand promise and our new brand platform always existed within these four walls here on campus. We just needed a little help telling that story. And they came back and they said, whole categories over here, we need to find the white space. Your value proposition is not price, it's empathy. And that's really where it took off. I think another important aspect of our creative is we don't want to make the brand the hero. I think in a lot of commercials and creative, the mistake brands make is they make their company or their brand the hero or the focal point. The hero should always be the consumer. Brand is the guide to help that consumer solve the problem. So that's why we don't have sort of a spokesperson. We're there to help the consumer solve the problem. And, maybe the last point I'd make is when we listen to pitches from our ad agency on different campaign direction, we measure our ads on goosebumps. A lot of it has been made around system 1 and system 2 sort of thinking. And we really want to appeal to the system 1 emotional aspect to creative. Do you feel something when you see it? And I think the advertising has to be distinctive. It's going to stand out. We don't have the budgets that many of our competitors do, so it needs to really stand out emotionally.
Well, speaking of emotion, you coach basketball. Now, is the passion for coaching these young people basketball the reason why you did a deal with the Celtics, so you could kind of go in there and do a little coaching on that bench as well?
I don't think they need it, Rob. Didn't they just win the finals?
If Joe Mazzulla needs an assistant on the bench, I'd be happy to volunteer my services. I love the game of basketball. I played it growing up. I coach AAU basketball in my limited free time for my 4 children. But that's not the reason why we partnered with the Celtics, although I get asked that many times. What led us to the Celtics was really trying to solve a business problem or an objective that we had. And that is, how do we grow in New England? Our home markets are such an opportunity for us to reach potential growth. We also looked at, where are the eyeballs today? And you guys are a television agency. I mean, I think there was a report that 95, 96 of the top 100 most watched programs last year were live sports. So people are watching sports. We want to grow in New England. And another business objective we have is connecting with a younger, more diverse customer. Our average customer age at Amica is 60 years old. And a lot of that is because of the longevity of that model that I talked about when we were referral only. We need to find a way to build the brand, not only with more consumers in that sort of baby boomer stage where we already resonate high, but how do we connect with a younger, more diverse consumer? And half of the NBA audience is under the age of 35, right? So you start looking at these objectives, and you also look at this team. This team is unbelievable, right? They just won their 18th championship, the most in league history. They've signed their core for the next 5 years. I don't think we could have timed this any better. My CEO said to me after we signed the deal that, you know what, Tory, sometimes it's better to be lucky than brilliant. And I don't know if I should take that as a compliment, but
You were in the right spot at the right time. I'd say take credit for it.
That's right. So it was a team effort, and we couldn't be happier to be locked in with the Celtics over the next few years. They're poised to be great. And maybe the final comment on the Celtics is, we talked about, how do we make this front page news instead of just sports page news? So one of the things that's so important with this is our involvement with the Shamrock Foundation. They have a nonprofit entity. I talked about how community is so important for our brand. We are going to partner with the Shamrock Foundation to donate over $2.5 million, which they will match over the 5 years of this deal, to build early education childhood centers in Providence, Rhode Island, and outside of Boston. There is such a need and a lack of quality early education. They took us through some research when we first partnered with them on how important years 1 through 5 are for young people, and how, it's very predictive for how they'll turn out in adulthood. We combined that and we said, how do we make meaningful change in the communities so it's more than just a patch? And that's something we're really, really proud of as well.
That's so inspiring. It's just a really cool story. You had a lot of initiatives and kind of stars aligned for both the business and just a larger cause. I want to shift a little bit into, how do we know things are working from a measurement perspective? You said something earlier, you measure on goosebumps, and measurement is probably something that we talk about on this effectiveness podcast more than anything else, if there was one single topic. And you've now got things like television, you've got sports team sponsorships, and you've got direct marketing efforts. Certainly it must be more than just goosebumps when it comes back to the bottom line. How does your team prove the impact of all of these efforts?
Yeah, I don't think my CFO would accept goosebumps as a KPI.
I was going to say.
I guess we evaluate creative pitches on goosebumps, but we have a lot of KPIs that tell us whether we're moving in the right direction. I referenced some of them earlier. We have these OKRs around brand equity that we measure through a brand tracker. We obviously look at leads and sales. Lead quality is important for us within the insurance category. We're very selective about driving a preferred risk into Amica. So that's another KPI we look at. Obviously, premium for our life product. And we're always trying to manage efficiency as well. So we measure cost per policy, but I would tell you, cost per policy has been an interesting one, and one that we've had a lot of debate about here at Amica. I think if you purely look at cost per policy and compare us or benchmark us to many of our competitors, we will look as outliers. And I think the reason for that is we're in a different part of our brand journey. As I mentioned earlier, we're more selective about the type of customer we're bringing in. So it costs more to dislodge that preferred customer that maybe doesn't shop as frequently. Obviously, we're investing in brand that we believe will pay off and make us more efficient in the long run. So one of the metrics that we're talking about using instead is more of an LTV to CAC sort of ratio. if our average customer is staying with us for decades, and is it fair to really compare us to maybe a competitor who doesn't have that sort of longevity? So there's many dashboards that we look at. We are very careful not to overreact to brand metrics in the short term. Although we look at them month to month, it can take time, and we believe we're investing in the future that way.
I don't know. I like measure on Goosebumps. I actually wrote that down, but it's obviously the rest of it's great too, especially the thought of kind of multiple models. And we would definitely be aligned with you. You've been talking about brand and thinking about the long term. It makes me so excited. Like, oh, this conversation's amazing because it's what we talk about on the podcast all the time. And you're someone who's really doing it, which is so great to get to talk about and have an example. And it sounds a lot like marketing effectiveness, which we're fans of here on the show. We talk about it a lot, maybe too much, but we've been asking these heads of marketing, CMOs that we talk to about marketing effectiveness because we think it's sort of rising in the United States. So what does it mean to you? And do you think that there's any kind of a gap in the US?
I've heard some of other CMOs answer this question, and they're probably much more eloquent than I will be here in terms of the definition of marketing effectiveness, because I think it really depends on what your business objectives are. There's some companies that are maybe investing in brand, or others that might be investing more in performance marketing channels. So at the end of the day, it's like, what are the problems you're looking to solve, or what are the business objectives that you're looking to accomplish? For me, I think part of marketing effectiveness is finding the optimal fit between brand and demand. That's one thing that we've talked a lot about here. And really finding the right mix between creative for different objectives. We've had a lot of success in building great television campaigns that are based on empathy as our best policy. But how to translate that message into lower funnel channels is something that I think we're still working on. One of our fastest growing media channels has been social media, right? So how do you translate that sort of message where you don't have 90 seconds to tell a long form story? We've also been testing into podcasts recently. We had a lot of success advertising on the Mel Robbins podcast in June. It was actually one of our most successful campaigns in terms of driving brand and unique site traffic to Amica.com, because we were able to do some very emotive storytelling with Mel's help on that podcast. So long way of saying marketing effectiveness to me is just finding that optimal mix between brand and demand, and making sure that you've got the right creative for each channel delivered to the right audience.
What about the gap? Not to put pressure on you, but do you think the US, do you think we're behind here to the UK, Australia, or what's your opinion?
I don't know. I've read some of the materials. I'm not as much of an expert on the international model. I've heard some of the experts say they're in a different sort of place in terms of how they evaluate creative and media. To me, it's apples and oranges. We are such a large country here, 300 million plus people. And sometimes when you look at these smaller countries, it's a little bit different, or it's apples and oranges. You're able to really carve out a different message that speaks to that audience. There's so much diversity here in this country and polarizing points of views. I don't know that it's fair to compare both markets.
Well, speaking of polarizing points of view, we love a good polarizing point of view on this show. We love contrarian thinking. You mentioned, even as you looked at creative, taking a contrarian view against what everyone else was doing. What would you say is your most contrarian marketing opinion?
I think it's time for a contrarian corner. The lines are drawn, who's right, who's wrong.
Oh my God, how much time do you have? So many. Can I give you two?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So one is really relevant to what we experienced here at Amica over the last year. In the insurance category, last year was one of the most unprofitable years in recorded history. Between the catastrophic events and record inflation, the way we measure profitability as an industry is what we call a combined ratio. And the combined ratio was record high as an industry. So many of us carriers were raising rates to get rate adequacy or become more profitable. And in doing so, many companies pulled back on marketing as a way to restore profitability. we saw a unique opportunity for us, as a challenger brand with the market share that we have. I'm a big believer in the equation of when your share of voice is greater than your share of market. That's usually a leading indicator for brand growth. I think you had Peter Field on here at one point. I've used his research to create the burning platform here at Amica, but we saw a unique opportunity, right? And while others pulled back on advertising, we actually doubled down on advertising and increased our share of voice to the highest point it's been in since we've been recording it in difficult economic times when others were pulling back. And what we saw was growth as a result of that. I think there's something to that, right? To have the guts. Now, we're a mutual company, so we don't have shareholders. We can take more of the long view and do things like that. That's one contrarian view, is invest in marketing when times are tough, because it'll have long-term impact.
Yeah, we love it. We won't disagree with you there, by the way. We're all like drooling. We're like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it during the pandemic, right? Like, I think a lot of companies kind of went through that, and the ones that held the line and doubled down are probably reaping the results now. Maybe one other one I'd leave you with is this concept of people have short attention spans, that the future is 15-second, 6-second ads, bumpers. I think there's a place for all of that, but I also think that there's a place for long form still. And if you're delivering the right message like we are, with an emotive sort of storytelling component, there's still a place for 60 seconds, dare I say even 90-second long form ads in television and other high reach media. One of our most successful campaigns this year was a campaign we call What You Leave Behind. It was to promote our life insurance product. And the idea here is no one wants to think about their own mortality, but we wanted to tell the stories of family members where someone had passed on and left a physical item that reminds them of their loved one, and make that connection between a physical item that you leave behind could be the same as a life insurance policy protecting your legacy for the future. These were nearly 4 minutes in length. We created three of them. By all accounts, how we measure attention, people are watching them from start to finish. So there's an appetite for long form if it's to the right audience and you're telling the right story. That'd be my other contrarian view.
Another good one.
I think a testament to the credibility that you've built with your team. I mean, not just marketing during a downturn, which can get people fired easily.
Right.
But also stepping out into a space that not many players play anymore. 60-second, 90-second, even longer. Very cool what you've done.
Yeah. You've made a lot of really amazing decisions. What would you say has been your best one? And on the flip side of that, what would you say you're like, God dang it, I'll never do that again?
Best decision, I would say, I'm going to give you two here as well. I'd say the first one is making the difficult call from a brand platform standpoint to remove price from all of our messaging, making that very difficult 180 pivot to say, we're not going to market on price. We are a service-oriented company, and it might result in fewer leads coming in at the top of the funnel because we're not marketing on price, but the ones that are attracted to this value proposition will convert at a higher rate. So I think the entire sort of creative switch that we made, I think the other one is just people. I have, and I'm not just saying this, but I have the most talented group of marketing leaders and marketing team that I've ever worked with in my career. They challenge me every day. They come with creative ideas. We're all aligned on the same vision. We've designed these OKRs so there's tension intentionally between brand and demand, and we roll up our sleeves and we have really tough conversations all the time. So I think another really good move is just having the best team, hiring, making organizational changes that put the best team on the field, or on the court, I should say, for a basketball analogy.
Awesome. All right. What's a boo-boo? What's one where you're like, dang it?
Oh, man. I don't want to get myself in any trouble here. So what I'll say in general is just one thing I've learned over my career is the most precious resource we have is time. And I think it's easy in a marketing role, in a marketing leadership role. You could spend all day engaging with people that are trying to sell you different things, or vendors that have the next solution. I think a boo-boo or a mistake would be just not dedicating time in the past to what really matters. I think now we're laser focused. I'm laser focused on the big rocks that will drive our strategy forward, and have no problem saying no to things that maybe I didn't earlier in my career. Last year, we handled over 1,300 projects. And part of that is being able to say no to some good ideas that maybe don't align with our OKRs.
Strategy is choice.
That's great. Well, Tory, thank you again for joining us. This episode was so fun. I'm thinking this will be like a case study for marketing effectiveness, and marketers can send it to your boss and convince them to invest in brand. Well, we like to end on a bit of a fun note. So I thought it might be fun to talk more about sports. Everyone here loves sports except for Rob. So you've made large investments in the Celtics, that partnership. So here's the question. If you could choose to have front row seats for life, they're free for any sports team, which one would you choose?
Oh, it's a no-brainer. It'd be the Boston Celtics.
Okay, maybe besides them. I should have eliminated them.
Besides the Celtics. So first of all, let me just say, if the Celtics look great. I mean, as we sit here today, they are off to a fast start. I can see banner 19.
I don't know. The Timberwolves look pretty good too, Tory. We're going to have to see.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe. But banner 19, I mean, to have the Amica patch immortalized on that jersey, should they be fortunate enough to win, would be a dream come true. Aside from that, if not the Celtics, one thing I didn't bring up is we also own the naming rights to the Amica Mutual Pavilion here in Providence, the AMP for short. And that was actually one of our first big brand moves. We could do a whole nother podcast on how that came about, but it used to be the Dunkin' Donut Center, the Dunk. And after a 20-year relationship, Dunkin' moved on, and we turned it into the AMP, and the Providence College Friars play there. So maybe if it's not the Celtics, I would say the PC Friars front row seats.
Those make sense. Rob, you want to go, or you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead, Ange.
I mean, it's easy for us to say, I guess, our home team, but actually it's not easy to say our home football team. It is very hard to be a Vikings fan, but I am a diehard Vikings fan, and I would love front row tickets to see the Vikings. Beyond that, I would love to watch my kids play sports for a lifetime. Wow. Wouldn't that be great? Unfortunately, we can't do that.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that is a good one.
Wow. Okay, so you're right. I really don't enjoy watching sports. I'm kind of a weirdo, but I have a good answer, which is any event at the Summer Olympics, because I'd only have to watch it every 4 years.
Man.
Rob, I'm going to bring you to a Celtics game and convert you to
yes,
basketball.
All right. Sounds good. I'll take you up on that.
Luckily for me, I might live in Minnesota, but I'm not a Vikings fan. I'm a Packers fan. So easy, front row seats. And those things are valuable. If you get on their waiting list for season tickets, you're on there for a lifetime. Like, you're basically, I should get on there for my kids because they will be Packers fans. So that would be
that's awesome.
I don't know. Did you follow in your father's footsteps? Isn't he a Vikings fan?
My dad's a fair weather Vikings fan. So we never watched the Vikings. It was never good weather for them, so we were never watching. Well, Tory, thank you again for joining. Anything you want to plug? We'll include, your LinkedIn, Amica's website, anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, check us out on amica.com. What You Leave Behind is a great campaign we've done. Listen to our Mel Robbins podcast. I don't know if it's fair to promote another podcast on this one, but
hers is okay.
Sure.
I like her podcast.
And just we're doing great things, and I'd love to come back, maybe in a year or two, and share more highlights of how this investment is paying off in results.
We would love that.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.